What's up everybody, Brad here. In this fourth and final installment of my miniDSP video series, I'll walk you through how to use REW'S alignment tool to align your subwoofers with your main left and right speakers, and how to check and set the crossovers for your other speakers as well. Does that sound good? Then let's go! So with this being the final video in the series, it goes without saying that if you haven't followed the previous steps, then you're kind of asking for trouble with your subwoofers. If you haven't seen the first 3 videos, I'd highly suggest that you watch those before this one, just to make following this video much easier and without the possibility of making your bass much worse. You can check them out through the card above, but I'll also put a link in the description below, as well as in a pinned comment for easy access. And before we dive in, if you're new to the channel, I post home theater and gaming related content every single week, so please consider subscribing if you haven't already. If you'd like to show your support for the channel, using my Amazon affiliate links, which you'll find in the description, will allow you to do that at no cost to you. And a big thanks to SVS for lending me a second PB2000 Pro subwoofer to help make these videos more detailed. Check out some of their products linked in the description. So to quickly recap what we've done so far, we've set up our subwoofers, set up the miniDSP, got the software configured, we've level matched all of our subwoofers so they're playing the same volume. We then time aligned those subwoofers, then EQ'd them, tweaked the EQ to where we want, and then if it's something that you do, you ran room correction, and now we're at this final step, which is aligning our subwoofers so they're playing nicely with our mains and getting us the best crossover. Now this is kind of a time-intensive process. We're going to be taking a lot of measurements and comparing measurements and selecting the best crossover based on those. Now, speaking of crossovers, a lot of people will buy speakers that are rated to go down to 40 hertz or 50 hertz, and they feel like I'm going to cross over my system at that because I paid for these speakers and I want to get the most performance out of these speakers that I can. And honestly, in most situations, not all, but in most situations, you're robbing yourself of bass performance. You're basically leaving it on the table. So keep that in mind, and also keep in mind that a lot of people will put their crossovers at 80 hertz and leave it there because they've read somewhere that that's the best place to put it, or it's a good starting point, and it is a great starting point. But what you might see and what you might find out with your system, you might actually end up crossing your speakers over higher than you anticipated or higher than you're used to. So if you're used to crossing them over at 60 or 80 hertz, honestly, that might not be the best spot for your room and your frequency response. So basically, we're going to be taking a bunch of measurements. We're going to use REW'S alignment tool, get the crossovers dialed in using that alignment tool, and then we're going to make that decision of where should we stick this, like where should we stick this crossover. So just try to keep an open mind as we go through this. So with all that said, let's go ahead and dive in, get started with REW. All right, so first and foremost, what we need to do in order to start this whole process is unhook our main left and right speakers in our system. So I've already done that with the receiver turned off. And the reason we want to do that is we want to isolate the bass at the crossover point, or the subwoofers at the crossover point that we select, and we're going to do a bunch of measurements, which you'll see in a moment. So as you can see here, this is after room correction. My Odyssey stuff is turned on. If I back out my speakers and my manual setup on my crossovers, you'll see they're all at 80 minus my top middle, which are 110. That's because that's the lowest they can go, and I honestly can't do anything with REW with those. So we won't be covering Atmos speakers in this video because they're not supported with REW. But as you see, they're all at 80, and this is the starting point I was talking about. Now I am going to go down to 60 just to kind of prove a point as an example, because basically we're going to be taking measurements at each step up to 120. So I'm starting at 60 and I'm going up to 120, and I'm going to basically do a measurement. And again, we want these isolated from the main left and right speakers, so we're just getting the subwoofer stuff. So in order to take a measurement properly, what we want to do is I'm going to go ahead and label this subs 60, and then for our output, we want this to be on the L plus R. That's basically going to give us a little bit more output, but remember, we're aligning our subwoofers with our mains, so we want both of these playing at the same time. This is the way I've done it. We've gotten excellent results, so this is the way I would recommend doing it. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to run a measurement, select a different crossover, run another measurement, and we're going to do that up until 120. All right, so I'm gonna click on the All SPL tab here. And as you can see, this is just our subwoofers. So you can see it starts to drop down considerably. Remember, our mains are not playing at all, and that's exactly what we want. So if we look here at 60 Hertz, this is where these two would intersect. You won't see that yet because we still need to do basically the same thing with the mains. So what I can go ahead and do is go back into my receiver, go under crossovers again, and raise that to 80. And then now we'll do another measurement. Label this 80. Okay, and as you can see, our little line here, it went up because our crossover is going up. So again, I'm gonna go through each and every one of these up until 120. I'm not gonna have you sit here while I take all these measurements, so you get the idea anyway. I'll take those and then I will be right back. All right, I'm back. So you guys see, you didn't even know I left because I still got my thumb up. That's not like an editing thing or anything, right? Anyway, so we're back in REW here. And yeah, I know this looks like spaghetti right now, but as you see on the left side, I have 60 Hertz all the way through 120. So 60, 80, 90, 100, 110, and 120. So if I start turning these off, we'll kind of take a quick glance at what they are. And yeah, they look a little weird because remember, we're not playing any of the mains. So we're just gonna see this massive drop off in output here, which is exactly what we want. So we'll go over to 80 and we'll see that if we kind of look here, should be around this area here. This is our crossover. And then we come over here. So we're just gonna basically see this increase as the crossover goes up. Makes sense, right? The subwoofers are playing more here than they are here with 80 because, you know, they're basically now responsible for 20 more Hertz, or actually from 80 to 90, it's 10 Hertz. So we've got like a 10 Hertz increase there in terms of overall output. So now basically what we want to do is we need to plug our mains back in and do a similar thing with those, but we're going to actually mute the subwoofers. So we're going to go ahead and turn the receiver off, get all that stuff hooked back up. But if REW likes to treat you like it does me, it gives you like a funny error when you go to actually turn your receiver off because stuff's hooked up HDMI. So I'm gonna go ahead and save this and close it out. So I'll just save this as time-aligned mains. I've done this once already. I'm just gonna overwrite that and we'll close it out. And I'll go ahead and turn stuff off and then I will again be right back. And I'm back. See, again, you didn't even know I was gone. This teleportation technology is really awesome. So I've hooked my mains back up. I've made sure that my volume is what it was before, which is very important. Now in here, we want to make sure that since you just went through all the crossovers, make sure that your crossovers are back at the beginning. You know, you could start at 120 and move your way backwards. I just find it easier to start at 60 again and then move my way up to 120. So make sure that that setting is correct. And then what we need to do now is mute the subwoofers. So in order to do that easily, we're just gonna come over to the miniDSP and we'll just mute the input 1. That way nothing's gonna go to the subs. So we'll go back to REW, go ahead and hit open and grab that time-aligned mains that we saved before. So that way we have these here as well. And we can go ahead and click all SPL and I'm gonna go ahead and turn all of these off here just to make it nice and clean so we can follow what's going on. And then I'm gonna click on measure and I will label this one L plus R 60. Remember, this is the left front speaker and the right front speaker crossover at 60. Again, we have the same thing, L plus R selected, and then we're just gonna go ahead and take a measurement. All right, so this looks really funky, right? Well, actually, if we look here and we turn on sub 60, you can see that right here at around 60 Hertz is where this would intersect and basically the fronts would pick up there and carry on. So the red line is a subwoofer and then this brown line will pick up there and continue on here. But obviously we're kind of just starting out. We're getting a little ahead of ourselves. So I just wanted to point that out because it's pretty interesting. So basically I'm gonna do the same thing again. I'm gonna go into the receiver. I'm gonna change the crossover to 80. And then we'll do a measurement here. Again, label this 80. And there is 80. So basically I'm gonna do the same thing I did before. I'm gonna do the rest of the measurements off screen, going up to 120 Hertz for the crossover, and then I'll come right back. Okay, so we're back here in REW and you see we've got all of our spaghetti models here. This looks like a hurricane thing. Anyway, so as you can see, I went through all of them here from 60 all the way up to 120. So now we're actually ready to start using REW's alignment tool to kind of figure out, you know, which one is the best. And it's actually really simple. So essentially what I like to do, and you don't have to do this, but this just helps me, is I will select the subs 60 and subs LR. That way I have a visual representation of kind of what to look at and where to put my crossover. So you gotta be under the all SPL tab. This won't work if you're in SPL and phase. All right, so to access the alignment tool, go ahead and hit the control button here and then click on alignment tool. And then once we're in here, what we wanna do is we wanna make sure that sub 60 is selected on the top or bottom, doesn't really matter. And then the other one is gonna be our left plus right 60. And if you don't see this stuff down here, you want to make sure that show phase traces is turned on. Now what we need to do is we need to take our cursor and put it at our crossover point. Doesn't need to be exact. At that point, just click on align phase slopes at cursor. And then you'll notice immediately it gives you a delay. Now this says minus 36.50, so it's a little far away. My eyes are bad. So basically, this is saying we need to apply a delay to our mains of minus 36.50. Well, obviously we can't do that, but what we can do is take this negative number and essentially it would end up being a positive number if we were to apply it to the sub. So instead of minus 36.5, it would be 36.5. So here's what I recommend doing. Instead of putting this in and then taking a measurement, stuff like that, I end up saving them on a notepad. So you see I have notepad saved right here and I have 60, 80, 90, 100, 110, 120, all right here. So I'm just gonna take this number and we're not worried about the negative part. And then I'm just gonna go ahead and paste it here. I'm just hit Control V. There it is, 36.50. And what I also like to do, I also like to click on Align Sum. And basically what that's gonna do is that's gonna create a predicted outcome of what these settings will do. So I'll just go ahead and label that 60 predict. And then we're good to go there. So I'm gonna go ahead, this is pretty simple actually once you kind of get into the groove of it. I'm gonna deselect these. Again, you don't have to do this part. It just helps me be able to visualize and see what's going on. So I'm gonna click on subs 80 and then we're gonna uncheck the L plus R 60 and check the L plus R 80. And then up here, you can go ahead and change the sub 60 to sub 80 and then the L plus R 60 to L plus R 80. Obviously that's gonna reset everything. And then we'll come over here again, move our cursor to 80, which is our crossover point here. Do the same thing. Click on Align Phase Slopes at Cursor. Again, it's gonna give you that delay. So we're gonna take that delay again, Control C to copy. We're gonna go back over to our notepad and just put that in. Again, we're not worried about the negative aspect of this part. We're just worried about the numbers themselves because anything negative here, we're gonna apply a positive delay to the subs through the miniDSP. So again, I'll click on Align Sum and I'll label this 80 Predict. And then again, we'll move on. And I'll do one more just to show you. I'm gonna go ahead and turn off these here. And then I'll choose subs 90, L plus R 90, and then I'll also change them here to subs 90, and then L plus R 90. And again, we'll need to go up here and find our crossover point, which is 90, it's right on the money. Click on the Align Phase Slopes at Cursor. And again, it's gonna give us that delay. I'm gonna Control C that all over here into our notepad and going back to REW, click Align Sum and label this 90 Predict. Okay, so that's basically the run through. Essentially, we need to go through each and every single one that we measured. So after this one, I'd change it to sub 100, L plus R 100, do the same thing that I just showed you. You can reference it, what I just did now, and make sure you select the proper crossover here. So 100 would be there. And then basically go through that process until you've done all of them. And the reason I like to save the predictions is it kind of gives us a little bit of an indication as to what the final output will be once we kind of input everything. So again, I'm gonna go ahead and do all of these off camera. I'll come right back and we'll start inputting these into the miniDSP and see what we get. All right, so I'm back here. I've done all of these measurements. As you can see, I've saved all the predictions out. So now that we have all these predicted ones saved, and remember, you should have went through and saved all of these as well. Now we're ready to input those into the miniDSP. So what we wanna do here is, if we bring up the miniDSP, you'll notice I also have a calculator pulled up. And the reason I do that is because sometimes these things can get a little, you know, if you have some weird numbers over here already, if you need to add some like 0.01 numbers to another one, it kind of just makes it a little easier and a little quicker to do it. So first of all, in the miniDSP, you want to make sure we unmute this because we don't want to mute these at all. And then under outputs, what we want to do is basically we want to take this number here and apply it to all of our subwoofers. And if we already have a millisecond delay in there, we want to add this number on top of what's already in there. So for instance, 4.2, we'd want to add 4.2 and 36.5 together. So we'd get 40.7. You know, again, if you have some really weird numbers, you can come in here and just paste this, Control V again, into the calculator, add 4.2, and it'll get you the same thing. Again, I'm just doing that as an example. So basically we'll put in 40.7 here. And then since I already copied that number from the notepad over here, I can just Control V and paste it right in there. And then here, which is 36.5 plus 8, so that is 44.5. And then now something very important, we want to make sure that we go in to our receiver and change that crossover. Just before we're going to do a measurement, we want to change that crossover back to whatever delay is associated with that crossover. So I changed it to 60 because for 60, I applied a 36.5 millisecond delay to all subwoofers. But now we're ready to start taking a measurement and comparing these. So I'm going to go in here and just label this crossover 60. Then I'll click measure. And as you can see now, if we compare this crossover 60 with the predicted one, obviously it's going to be a little different. 60, I wouldn't want to use that. Obviously, it's just the response is no good. So we can move on. I'll go ahead and turn on 80 predict. I'll go back into my receiver, change the crossover to 80. And then now we'll go back to the miniDSP and back into our notepad, and we're going to change these again. So now we're going to take the 80 number that's associated with the 80 hertz crossover, since we changed it to that, and we're going to input the 34.06 in here. So I'm going to Control C to copy that. I'll bring my calculator back up so you can kind of follow me along here. Remember, there was 4.2 here before, so we can just paste this in here. Plus 4.2, 38.26 is what we put for the delay in here. Then I can just tab over. This one was 0, so we can just go ahead and paste that 34.06 in there. Tab over again. This one was just a straight 8, so again, 34.06 plus 8, 42.06. Again, I can do this in my head. I'm just showing you that it's pretty easy. Now, I accidentally pasted the original number in there, which is okay. We can just delete it, and there we go. Now we are ready to take another measurement here. And we'll just click on measure again, click on that and change it to 80. I double clicked and it just selected 60. So that makes it really convenient. And then we'll just go ahead and do another measurement. So again, here is the predicted and here is our actual outcome. So you can see it's a bit different. We got a bit more of a dip here, a little null here. This is just a best case scenario. So what I'm gonna go ahead and do, I've ran through these two. Pretty simple, as you can see. I'm gonna go ahead and run through the other ones because you can always reference the first two back if you're kind of a little bit lost, but it should be pretty self-explanatory. Just take the number from your notepad, put it into the miniDSP, and make sure you change that crossover in the receiver when you go to do the measurement. That way you're gonna get an accurate response. So I'm gonna go ahead and run through all of these and we'll come back and we'll select the best crossover for our speakers, our subs in our room. All right, so I've ran through all of these measurements from 60 to 120. So this is our crossover at 60. This is with the alignment plugged into miniDSP, just like I showed you a moment ago, and you know, it's not very good. So let's turn on 80, and as you can see by the highlighted one here, it's already a bit better. We still got some weirdness going on in there. So we'll unclick crossover 60, that's no good. Right now we are deciding on which one of these we're gonna choose. So crossover 80, looking good. If I click on crossover 90, we're already a little bit better actually. If we take a look here compared to the other one, and you know, kind of the background there, the highlighted one is the 91. I think the 91 looks way better, but we're starting to see a little bit of weirdness up here. So let's go ahead and move on to 100. And then now we're really starting to see some really good positive changes. And this is what I was saying about crossing your speakers over at 80 might not be the best deal for you here. So if we keep going, you actually should see it get slightly better. We are creating this little weird null up here. Kind of see this is a little too much. I'd probably stick with 110 if I'm being completely honest, although 100 doesn't look too bad either. But for my speakers in my room, I think the crossover 100 is the one that I'm gonna settle on. So what I'm basically gonna do, because I've already done the 120, is I'm gonna go into the receiver, change that to 100 for the crossover of the fronts, and then I'm gonna go back into the miniDSP, reference my notepad again, and then I can go ahead and bring up my calculator as well, and we'll find 100, take that number, put it back in. Again, I'm just doing this as just to show you my process here. And we'll put that number in first. Remember, I added 4.2 to this one because that was already there. And then this one had 8. So that would be 21.8. So now that is our crossover point for our speakers. And I gotta say, that looks much better than if we were to just cross them over at 60 or 80, if we just compare the two here. That's a noticeable difference in my opinion, especially at 60. I mean, that's a massive lack of bass there, and we don't want that at all. So now after you've decided on a crossover, make sure you change your crossover in your receiver to the one that you selected. If it's 120, set it to 120. It might already be there. Set it to 100 if it's 100, so on and so forth. And go back in and reference this little notepad here and just make sure you put those numbers back in after you go through that process. And that way, you know, everything is set there. And that's pretty much it for the miniDSP. We're not really going to be touching that anymore at all. But what I would recommend doing is going in and measuring the left and right speaker separately, just to make sure that nothing's weird or wonky, or you don't have any massive nulls. So go ahead and do that here. I had left 120 labeled. You're going to want to change this from L plus R to L and just take a measurement here. All right, so we're looking pretty good. We got a couple little funny spots here, but honestly, nothing really too bad. I mean, this is totally fine here. I really didn't want to see any massive dips in these areas here. So we'll go ahead and take a measurement of the right as well. Change that to R instead of L. All right, so let me go ahead and deselect these two. And yeah, the right looks actually better than the left, believe it or not, but those look really, really good. So now we're ready to move on to the final step, and that is making sure the crossovers on our center and surround speakers are where they should be as well. So in order to do that, I'd recommend first saving all of these measurements that we just did. That way you can always reference them later if you like, or just save over the other one, because they're all the same pretty much. And then what I want to do is close out of REW and just start new. That way we don't really have to worry about it getting all cluttered and stuff. So I've opened up REW, starting over again. And now for this, you are going to need a program called ASIO for All. It's a free program. I'll link to it in the description. But basically, you're going to want to install that. And initially, it might not be set up properly. And what we need to do is go ahead and go into Preferences in REW. Under Drivers, select ASIO, and then we're going to choose this ASIO for All V2. And there we go. And initially, you might have to go down here into your little tray icon, click on ASIO for All, and then make sure that whatever your HDMI output is called, on mine it's Intel Display Audio, make sure that is turned on and that the U mic is also turned on. Anyway, that's good to go there. When you exit out of that and you go to do stuff in here, you might get a little notification that says it needs to restart or something. Just click OK, but you should be good. Also, when you switch over, you want to go over to Cal Files and make sure under ASIO for All V2 that your UMic calibration file is input into there. If it's not, you go ahead and browse and find it. Mine's already input in here. So we're basically ready to start taking measurements. So I'm going to click on Measure, and there we go. Like I said, that device reset. Just click OK here. It's just saying that you went in and changed settings and it needs to switch over to something. So click on Measure, and then we're just going to label this Center and whatever your crossover on your receiver is. So on mine, if I look at mine real quick, my crossover on my center is set to 80. So I'm just going to say Center 80. And then for the center one, it's going to be output 3 on mine. It might be different on yours, but they should be pretty much all the same. So we'll just click Start and we'll take a measurement. Okay, so if we look here, we got some issues, definitely. It's not as good as it could be, I don't think. But basically, we're going to go through like we did before, and I'm just going to do a measurement of 80, 90, 100, 110, 120, just to see which one gives us the flattest frequency response there, and I'll be right back after I do that. All right, so I've went through and measured all of them. I'll start unclicking them here. I'll just compare them real quick, pick the one that gives us the best frequency response. So obviously 80 right off the bat, not that great. Click on 90, and highlighted here, it's already looking a bit better. This area in here, the blue one, is a bit more flat. It's a little higher. We'll uncheck 80, and then we'll go ahead and check out what 100 looks like, and I'd say it looks a bit better. We're starting to get a little more output there, which is good. So 100 is kind of where it's at right now. Let's check on 110, and that one looks pretty good too. What about 120? And honestly, 120 and 110 kind of look the same. 120 seems to have this kind of bigger null here. So I'm going to stick with 110. on this one. So basically I just go back into the receiver, select 110 as my crossover for my center, and that's good to go there. And now basically I'm gonna move on and do the same thing for the surround speakers. Now in my setup right now, I have a bunch of lights and equipment right here off camera that you can't see, you know, as I'm recording. So I'm gonna do the right surround speaker. Normally I would start with the left, but because it's all blocked off and stuff, it's just not ideal. So basically I'm just gonna repeat the whole process I just did with the center channel. Go ahead and uncheck 110, but that's the winner, so I'll get rid of 120. I'll click on measure. I'll label this RS 80 because that's where it's at right now, and then I'll select 6. So 5 would be the left surround, 6 is the right surround. Unfortunately, Atmos is not supported currently in REW. Hopefully one day it will be. So I'm just gonna leave those at where they're at right now. But essentially, I'm gonna go ahead and do a measurement at 80. And as we could see, we got kind of a crappy response here. So I'm just gonna keep going just like I did before. I'll do it off camera, I'll come back, we'll kind of look at them and pick the best one. But basically, I'm gonna change a crossover every time, do a measurement, and then compare them all at the end and pick the best one. All right, so I just did all those measurements on the right surround speaker. So again, we'll start with 80 and compare it to all the other ones. So right off the bat, 80's got this null here that I don't really like. I prefer not to have it. So if I go ahead and check out 90, 90's already starting to look a little bit better here, but we're seeing this null down here. I don't really like that. So maybe move up to 100 and see what that looks like. And you know what? We're actually looking better at 100 than 80. So right now, 100 is the winner. 100, sorry, I keep wanting to say 100. It's a bad Florida habit, trust me. Let's check out 110, and you know, 110's looking pretty good. I'd probably actually select between 1 or 110 right now. I'm gonna go with 110, just go with my gut. And then we'll check out 120, and with 120, this null up here, as you can see, if I unselect it, with 110 it was only here. What was it with 100? It was about the same actually, so 110 seems to be our winner. With 120, that null is just too much. So 110 is the winner. I'm gonna go ahead and go into the receiver and change that. Sorry, my other camera died, so I wasn't able to record it, but I'm basically, like I said, changing the crossover from 120 to 110. So I've settled on 110 for the right surround, and what I would go ahead and do is, if I wasn't recording this, again, because I have all this equipment here next to me, is I would go ahead and do a measurement on the left surround speaker as well, just to make sure nothing funky is going on. And because I only have a 5.3.2 setup, I guess, I only have the 5 bed channels. So if you have speakers behind you, like if you're rocking the 7.1, then you want to use REW and select the proper channels and select the right crossovers for those as well. So that's pretty much it. We've ran through and we've aligned the subwoofers with our mains, and then also went through and verified that we have the best crossovers for all of our other speakers in our system, minus our Atmos speakers, because like I said before, it's not supported with REW. But hopefully following these miniDSP guides really helped you out and has your system sounding better than it ever has. So now that you've got everything dialed in to where you want it, it's due time to give everything a listen and make sure it sounds better than it ever has. And not just a quick demo of a single scene, I don't mean that. Pick out a few different clips, preferably ones you're familiar with, and listen to them a few times. Pick out some music and listen to that too. Now, one thing to keep in mind is if your initial subwoofer measurements before time alignment and EQ had massive peaks in certain areas, for example from 50 to 70 Hertz, your initial thought when listening to your system after calibration is that you might be missing out on bass. This actually isn't that uncommon, and my recommendation here would be to give it a few days, if not a week, of listening. You should start to notice that you aren't actually missing bass at all, but instead have a really balanced and tight soundstage that can dig deep when it needs to, but also be subtle when it needs to as well. If after listening to it for a week or so, you still feel the need for more bass, consider boosting the overall output a bit more in the miniDSP and give that a shot. It's actually a lot like the first time you calibrate your TV or projector. If you're used to watching everything in vivid picture mode, for example, which, by the way, stop doing that, then your picture may seem dim and less sharp and way too warm. But give it enough time and you'll start to notice details in the shadow areas you didn't notice before. That the picture is actually very detailed without all the issues that come with setting sharpness too high, and that colors and skin tones look extremely natural unless you're watching a Michael Bay flick. My point is, give your ears time to adjust to the way your system sounds after dialing in your subwoofers before you just write it off. Now, while this is the final video in this series, I do want to add a "for now" here at the end. As I've said before, I'm an enthusiast, I'm not an expert. I'm constantly trying to learn all I can when it comes to home theater and technology in general, and as I discover new or better ways to do things, I'll try and add a video about it to this playlist. There are way more advanced things within REW that I'm simply not familiar with yet, but as I do learn about them, I'll put them into a video so you can learn about them too. If you enjoyed this video at all and found it helpful, please give it a thumbs up as it helps this video reach far more people. If you have any questions about the stuff covered in this video, leave a comment down below and let me know. I'll try to get to it if I can. Thank you for watching, everyone, and I'll catch you in the next one.